We begin with the question, what is design? And design is the conscious intervention in the organization of energy. So, for example, we have time, we have money, we have attention, we have natural resources. These would be four of the most fundamental dimensions of energy as we experience it. So design is the conscious intervention in the organization of that energy. And the purpose is always the same. All human beings throughout all of human history have wanted one thing. We pursue it in 1,000 different ways, going about it at different times and different places, but it's always the same goal. We want to feel sustainably better. And by extension, we want the people we care about, the people around us, to feel sustainably better as well. By extension, we want the underlying ecology upon which we depend to function sustainably. We want to feel good, and we want that feeling to last. I mean, it's easy to take a quick hit of cocaine or speed or anything else and have a spike. It's easy to go into debt with credit cards and have a spike. It's easy to have anonymous sex and have a spike. But what we're really interested in, after the volatility of rising and falling, is what we're really interested in is sustainable well-being. We're interested in it emotionally, we're interested in it physically, we're interested in it mentally. And in the midst of that triangle, social well-being, economic well-being, physical well-being, logistical well-being, etc. That's what every human being wants. And by extension, to avoid feeling chronically worse. We want to feel sustainably better. We want to avoid feeling chronically worse. And design is the conscious intervention in the status quo. So everything that is happening is happening. That's the status quo. Design is the interjection of conscious intention that alters the existing flow of energy so as to increase sustainable well-being for ourselves and ripple out to the world around us. That's design. Now, good design is intelligent design, and intelligence is measured by the efficiency with which energy is transformed into sustainable well-being. Given that every human being wants to feel better and wants to avoid feeling worse, efficiency is a core part of intelligence, because intelligence is measured by the success with which one achieves one's objective. So given that the objective is to feel sustainably better, failure is to feel chronically worse. So the measure of a person's intelligence is how efficiently are they transforming energy, time, money, natural resources, towards sustainable well-being for themselves and the world around them. And the more efficiently they're doing that, the more intelligent they are. And so intelligent design is the mastery of achieving an efficient conversion rate of energy into sustainable well-being on all the different dimensions that applies. And efficiency is about the cost. I mean, some people can take $1 billion and 10 years and 3,000 acres of land. And with all that, they can make one person happy for an hour and 1,000 people miserable for 10 years. So that would be a very low level of intelligence, an extraordinary amount of energy, time, money, and natural resources to make one person happy for an hour and 1,000 people unhappy for 10 years. Now, so how do you do that? Well, let's imagine that your idea of intelligence is maximizing bank accounts. And so you pay 1,000 people for 10 years to deforest thousands of acres. And you don't treat them well, so you've got 1,000 unhappy people, and you have thousands of acres less forest. And because of hedonic adaptation, the more you have, the more you own, the less it matters. The first car that you get when you're 15, 16, whatever years old, this beat up junker means the world. But once you have 1,000 cars and it's just a hassle to drive from dealership to dealership, the next car may actually make you feel worse because it's a reminder that you're on the wrong track. It's a reminder that your design is failing, because the design of someone who's unhappily acquiring 1,000 cars is that because that first car made you happy, more cars will make you more happy. But the design is flawed with hedonic adaptation. The more you do the same old thing, the less result. It's the same with cocaine. That one hit is going to make you happy, so you do twice as many hits and then twice as many hits. But it's a flawed design, right? You're doing the same thing that worked initially, but it's working less and less. And money and material acquisition are on that hedonic continuum. Going from $1 to $100,000, huge return on investment. Going from $100,000 to $300,000, not as much. Going from $100 million to $300 million, you may feel worse. It's no longer doing what it did originally. And so this is, a principle of hedonic adaptation. And good design has to understand these principles. Now, intelligent design, good design, achieves sustainable well-being more efficiently than unintelligent design. That's the continuum. A great design takes almost no time, money, and natural resources to create vast amounts of sustainable well-being for oneself, those one cares about, the world at large, and the ecology that we all depend on. So why cultural design? And as preamble, I would say that the thing that most interests me, the thing that seems most relevant to everything that I do, is cultural design. I am a cultural designer. I aspire to be an excellent and intelligent cultural designer. And so what is cultural design? And to answer that, we have to look at, first of all, the root word of culture, which is cult. Now, when we think of a cult, we think of group mind. We think of following the herd without thinking. We think of dogma. We think of brainwashing. We think of indoctrination. These are some of the associations with the root word of culture, which is cult. So we could say that the cult in culture is the unconscious, repetitive copying of the group design, of the group meme. So the group is defined, it has an identity that is defined by its pattern. That's a cycle, a pattern. It goes round and round. That's that group mind. That's that brainwashing. That's that repetitive dogma. It has a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. So in our cult, we try to be cool. In our cult, we speak English. In our cult, we all agree that whoever has the most money is the most important. In our cult, we all agree that whoever has the most degrees, the most PhDs, is the most important. Well, in our cult, we agree that whoever's the most muscular. So a cult has a hierarchy of values. All cults have the same values, just in a different order of priority, a different hierarchy. So a cult has a hierarchy of values, and it has predominant strategies, memes that have been established in the reflection and pursuit of those values. The cult has a recognizable pattern. You can say, oh, that's an American. That's a Jehovah's Witness. That's a Muslim. How? How do you know? How do you know? Well, they're praying 5 times a day. They're wearing this thing. The woman has a thing. That's a habit. It's a meme. It's a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that is recognizable by the person who identifies with the cult and by the observer. Now, some cults are relatively subtle, so the observer may or may not be able to recognize it. Some cults are hidden. You know, if you have secret handshakes that you only do when you're alone, how would you know, out in public that you were both part of a cult, or that that person was part of a cult that you're not a part of, right? So the cult ranges in subtlety, but it is a repetitive habit. And the cult-like nature of every culture is the part that says, don't think, don't ask, don't examine, don't question. Just do it because I said so, because we said so, because that's what we do. That's the thing that we all do. You know, it's the flag, it's the college degree, it's the get a Mercedes, whatever it is. That's what we do. You know, we smoke a cigar and drink 100-year-old whiskey. Why? I don't particularly like the taste of whiskey. I'd rather champagne, but then you're not part of our cult. Or we just drink heavily. It's a very vague cult, but everyone in our cult drinks heavily, and if you don't drink heavily, then you're not welcome. You don't belong. You don't fit in to the meme. So a cult is a series of dogmatic habits. A culture, meaning the chur part of the cult, you have cult and chur, is an evolving habit. So in ultimately dead cults, there's no freedom of change. They're incredibly ossified. They're frozen in time, and they gradually lose touch with their environment. You know, you ride around in a horse and buggy. Now, at one time, that was intelligent technology. Meaning at one time, the horse and buggy was the most efficient way of transporting energy. And so it was adopted. But in brainwashed, ossified cults, they are self-referential. So a self-referential statement is, we do this because we did this. And we did this because it was the right thing to do. And so that's why we did this, and we do this because we did this, and that's who we are, and that's why we do it. Now, notice the only slight doorway out of a complete prison of circular thinking was that at one point it was the right thing to do. Meaning we need to move from here to here. There are horses, there are buggies. Let's use a horse and buggy to move things from here to here. But then the next generation, we did this because it's the right thing to do, and we do it because we did it. And we did it because it's the right thing to do, and we do it because we did it. So now we've lost touch with the outer environment. We're now in a circular loop. There's no way out of that. 1,000 years later, there can be spaceships, there can be warp drives, there can be energy transformation. But we're using horse and buggy because we're defining ourselves by the strategy, by the pattern that at one time was innovative and now is killing us, right? At one time, that was the fastest way to move. Now it's the slowest way to move, but we're holding on to it because we're in a cult. So a pure cult without any evolution is trapped in a self-referential loop that as life moves on and develops newer and newer technologies, a species is a technology produced by life. And 95% of all species that have ever existed are now dead because they did not respond efficiently enough to the environment to compete effectively for energy within life's game, right? You see, if the dodo bird comes along and walks at 3 miles an hour and doesn't learn to pick up the pace, and life produces another species, a wolf, and then another species, a fox, and they run at 8 miles an hour, and then another one at 12 miles an hour, and then another one at 15 miles an hour, and the dodo bird still chugs along at 5 miles an hour. The dodo bird goes extinct. It does not evolve fast enough to outrun the competitor for energy. And so life cannibalizes life with a more efficient design. And so life is in the business of generating variety, generating competition, and winning. Life is always winning because life is the wolf, life is the fox, life is the dodo bird, and life is the 95% of all species. It's probably closer to 99.9% of all patterns of energy that have ever existed have been consumed by more complex and more efficient patterns of energy. And life's power, life's beauty, life's complexity, life's competency continues to grow. Now, the same is true in human culture. Anthropologists will tell us that there have been more than 10,000 cults in human history. 10,000 languages, 10,000 paradigms, 10,000 belief systems, 10,000 mythologies. And 95% of them are now dead, meaning there are less than 500 thriving cults on the planet today. Languages are going extinct every couple of years. Some languages go extinct every couple of weeks. They're dying. And they're being taken over by more vibrant networks of cult and culture. And this ties into the network effect, meaning Facebook is valuable today, for now, because of the size of its network. Meaning Facebook would have zero value if only 2 people knew about it. It's a cruddy service, irritating ads, unfriendly policies, surprise this, surprise that, has influx. Facebook itself is already outdated, but it has a network effect. Meaning if you join a much superior operating system of social networking, you will be downstepping your impact because nobody's on it, right? So the more people that are on a network, the more valuable the network is. The telephone is another one, right? It's just a series of 10-digit numbers, right? Who cares? Why not have a two-digit thing or have our own little microphone network? Well, what makes a phone so valuable is that everyone can be reached around the world with those 10 digits. And so if you're on that network where you can call this and do this and do this, so there's a network effect. And so English is one of the most lively networks. If you can speak English, you have access to Wikipedia in English. You have access to this, you have access to this. So it's a powerful network. If you learn Swahili, there are very few new resources that open up to you. Some, for sure, if you want to go dating in a Swahili-speaking area, then there's a whole set of resources that open up. But if you want to start a business, if you want to start an online business, and you do it in Swahili, your size is greatly limited, and as a result, the amount of investment that will go into you is greatly limited. And so there's a network effect. And that is true in culture. So every culture has a probability field. For example, if you take all of the statistics in the United States or in England or wherever, you take the statistics in a country and you say, how many suicides are in this cult? How many people are depressed? How many people are lonely? How many people are traumatized? How many people are sexual abuse victims? How many people are addicted to some behavior? Could be work, could be sex. They're addicted. They're compulsive about some behavior. How many people are compulsive about some form of behavior? How many people are compulsively consuming a substance, cigarettes, alcohol, whatever? How many people feel deep senses of well-being? How many people feel a sense of meaning? How many people have a clarity about the purpose of their life? You can ask 100 meaningful questions along these lines, and every cult, every culture will have a statistics. These are the number in, this is the size of the group, 200, 300, 400 million, whatever it is. And we have per capita, this amount of this, this amount of this, this amount of this. How many people are in prison? How many people lie? How many people tell the truth? How many people are deeply satisfied with their relationship? How many people love their country? So these are some of the relevant, meaningful questions. And every culture has a statistical receipt. We do these things, we say these things, we feel these things. We're this way. We eat these things. We show up like this. This is what we do, what we say, what we think, what we feel, and how we show up. And this is the result. 70% of people are lonely, 1% are in prison, 30% of our money goes into taxes, X percent goes here, X percent. It's a protocol, it's a recipe. A cult is a recipe. A culture is a recipe of organizing energy, time, money, and natural resources, and attention. And it has a byproduct. And the byproduct, relative to the energy consumed, determines the intelligence of the cult. So a cult that takes $10 per person per year, it's always the same amount of time, 24 hours a day for everyone, X amount of time, and 1.5 trees and 300 gallons of water, and 95% of the people are very happy and feel safe and have meaningful lives. Or a cult produces X amount of toxins, X amount of imprisonment, earns X amount of money per capita, cuts down X amount of trees, and feels okay, confused. Well, that's a much less intelligent cult, right? It's consuming more energy, but there's less sustainable well-being, which means there's less competence, which means the cult is less intelligent, less efficient at transforming energy, time, money, and natural resources, into sustainable well-being. Well, that's what a cult is. A largely self-referential thing. We do it because we do it, and that's how we do it, and so do it. You know, you look at the conversations between kids and parents around school. Why do I have to go to school? Because that's what you do. You have to get a degree, high school diploma. Why do I have to get a high school? Because that's what jobs require. Why do jobs care whether I know algebra or not? Well, they just do. Well, I don't like it. Well, do it because I said so. Do it because I'm going to hit you. Do it because we'll shame you otherwise. Because at one time that was a good idea. You know, why should I go to college? Well, you know, and so why cultural design? Well, first we have to understand why we have cultures. Why do we have groups? Why do we have cults? Why do we have cultures? Well, it's the same reason we have routines. It's the same reason we have identities. Why do we have a habit of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, as opposed to in every moment deciding, maybe I'll be a Buddhist in this moment, maybe I'll be a Christian in this moment. I'm just every single moment deciding everything. Because that's kind of the other polarity in cult. You have cult, everything is done the way it's done because that's the way it's done. You have innocence, you have spontaneity, you have wonder, which is the opposite. I don't even know what I am. I'll think about it now, and then I'll think about it now, and I'll think about it now, and I'm completely in the moment. Well, the crisis is one of bandwidth. So the first thing is the conscious mind cannot keep up with everything. Meaning, if right now in this moment, let's just freeze the moment as a concept because it's already passed. But right now in that moment, I have to invent a language, decide whether I'm hungry or not, decide if I should wear clothes or not, why. Those are all thoughts. Should I wear clothes? Why should I wear clothes? Should I wear these clothes? Should I do that clothes? Should I do this? You can see you're already overwhelmed. We're overwhelmed by the amount of freedom and choice in the moment. And so what a cult does is it takes 95% of that off of our plate and turns it into a rhythm, a routine, a pattern that's on autopilot. I wake up at 7 p.m. Why? Because that's my pattern. Why did you set that pattern? Because that's when work starts. Work starts at 9 p.m., so I wake up at 8 p.m. Why does work start at 9 p.m.? I don't know, it just does. That's the cult. So I need to be at work, so I wake up at 7 p.m. I don't wake up at 5 p.m. and say, maybe I should get up now. No, it's not 7. I go back to the routine. So what a cult basically says is we've got all this stuff figured out. You should dress like this. You should do your work like this. You should spend this type of money. You should be paid this amount. You should think along these lines. Farmers should be paid less than accountants. Why? It's just the way we've designed it. So you're growing useful food for people, get paid almost nothing. You're pushing papers around, get paid 10 times more. Why? Well, it's just how we've designed it. Don't ask more. If you want to make more, be an accountant, don't grow food. Why? Because that's the way it is, right? And so that's the cult-like nature. So the cult organizes all these things into what's called the default mode area of the brain. So we can see that our routine is our personal cult. The default mode network within the brain maintains our personal pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. When we look at the mirror and say, that's me, how do we know? Well, you sound like you. How do you know? Because you're making English sounds that have this rise. Well, why are you doing that? Well, that's just the way my voice sounds. That's the way I did it before. Otherwise, I wouldn't recognize my voice. That's not me. Why? Because you've never talked like that before. You're the one that talks like this. You have that emphasis. So this is your tonal range. This is your language. These are your gestures. You don't just go like that. You go like this, right? That's the gesture you made yesterday. So now you're making it today and again, right? So I see that. I saw those hands move like that before. So that's me. I recognize, I notice that's me because I observe the pattern, meaning I've done it many times before. So I have a strong identity, meaning it's a regular habit. Wakes up at clockwork, always has poached eggs for breakfast. That's an identity. That's a cult. And it exists in the default mode network of the brain, which defaults to copying or mirroring the cult. Now, it's worth having a quick look at what evolution is. So, as an infant, you're born into a cult. It's called a family. And they do things like this, and they speak like this, and they're schizophrenic like this, and they do things like that. You're born into the cult, and you copy it. They eat porridge for breakfast, so you eat porridge for breakfast. They speak English, so you speak English. Children are seen and not heard, so you are seen and not heard, right? Because if you are heard, you get sent away, and you don't want to be sent away, so you conform to the cult as an infant, as a child. You adopt the cult as a direct copy. Now, as you move into adolescence, you're moving from the state of sympathy, which is the unquestioning state of innocence, to antipathy, which is the questioning rebellion of the adolescent. But you're a hypocrite. But that makes no sense. But you're a bully, and you say bullies are bad. That makes no sense. But you say you're a Christian, but you're greedy, and you don't help the meek. You're corrupt, but you say don't lie. I mean, the adolescent questions the cult, defrags, disintegrates the system, the status quo, and rejects it. Because all cults, all systems have innate flaws. As soon as you take the one, the perfect undifferentiated whole, and you cut it into bits called a system, there are flaws in the system. There are inefficiencies in every system. And so the adolescent's job is to find those problems and to rebel, to complain, to magnify everything that's wrong with the system in preparation for synthesis. The way evolution works is sympathy, antipathy, evolutionary synthesis. So what is evolutionary synthesis? Because now we're moving into the state of the adult. The adult moves from the polarity of complete rejection of everything that's so fucked up about mom and dad, and the stupidity of your teachers, and the self-aggrandizing, obnoxiousness of the priest, and all this idiotic stuff, and it's just so disgusting, right? So the adult takes all of that and rejects the worst, meaning the stupidest, the most inefficient, the most hypocritical. It rejects the worst of what was, of who they've been programmed to be. But it embraces the best of what was. Meaning, if you're an adult and you've gone through the state of rebelling against everything, you don't reinvent the English language because you know a better one that nobody knows, of course, so you can't communicate. You don't get rid of currency because you've got, in your ideal thing, you give pine cones, right? Except nobody will give you a stereo for your pine cone or a car for your pine cone, right? An adolescent will, but an adult does not reject the English language, does not reject the currency of their country, does not reject all transportation, does not live out in the wilderness without any energy or technology of any kind. An adolescent may, but an adult accepts the best of what was, what's still relevant, what's still intelligent, the thing that is available that is doing a reasonable job of turning energy into sustainable well-being. Meaning, as a organic vegetarian, your ideal is to have local, organic, homegrown, vegetarian food prepared with real love. And you're at a food court. None of it is prepared with real love. There's 2% organic vegetables. Half of it isn't vegetarian. It's got this and that. But it's available now, right? And some of it tastes pretty good. The adult will take the best of what has been, reject the worst of what has been, and iterate it, evolve it, design a synergy into something better, to something new. That's cultural evolution at an individual level. Sympathy, antipathy, synthesis. Child, adolescent, adult. Now, as adults evolve, they challenge their cult to keep up with them. That's a healthy evolution, forced by the people. And so if a cult lags too far behind due to its traditionalists, its radicalists, nobody's going to change us, we're going to, drive horse and buggies, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. An evolving, one of two things happens. The cult may die. Or the majority of the cult moves forward. Or a minority of the cult moves forward and evolves and grows and becomes the majority. But either way, life continues. Life continues. So what design is the conscious interjection in that evolutionary process on the continuum of intelligence with the innate underlying goal of sustainable well-being which by extension means avoiding feeling chronically worse. That's what cultural design is. Now, why is it the single most important science, the single most important skill that we can conceive of? Well, to start off with, we have to look at the dominant species on the planet. Which planet is the biggest wild card in how many species live or die on the planet? What's the temperature? What's the weather volatility? Like, are tigers changing weather volatility? How about giraffes? So the first thing we conclude is that at the present time, human beings are having more impact on the planet than any other species, number one. Number two, human beings are the only species on the planet that have the potential of functioning as sexual organs. So what's a sexual organ? A sexual organ combines two energies in such a way as to create a synergy, to create a third alternative, a synthesis that could not exist without both, and gives birth to new life forms, new complexity. That's the function of sex. Now, Earth has given rise to billions of distinct energy patterns, some of which have the capacity to exist in some of the billion planets in our galaxy that are capable of sustaining life. Meaning there are a billion planets out there that are capable of sustaining life, and some of the patterns on this planet will find fertile environment in some of those planets and evolve in ways and grow in ways that without the migration of those patterns of energy to those planets will never happen, right? Meaning, if certain patterns of life here do not find themselves out there, then when this planet becomes a supernova, when this planet ceases to exist in its present form, then all the life patterns, all of life's records will die out here. But if a species on this planet projects, shoots patterns of energy present on Earth out there into the galaxy, and some of those patterns land on some of those environments capable, conducive of life, then 1 trillion years from now, there may be continents, there may be planets out there that are more evolved, more complex, more beautiful, more symmetrical, more sustainable than anything we have here. And that won't happen if the sex organs of this planet don't function. If we can't get it up and get it out, 1 trillion years from now, 1,000 planets filled with the seeds from this planet may not exist. Well, in the myopic, narcissistic self-centeredness of a traumatized human animal with a reptilian brain, we don't care about planets, 10 years out into space. We don't care about the next 1,000 years, let alone the next billion years, let alone the next trillion years. We're dead, right? So the myopic ego that is focused purely on this body, who cares? Who cares if this is a nuclear wasteland? Who cares? I'm not around to enjoy it, says the ego. But we are not limited to the limitation of our ego. There is a transcendent element in every human being, a transcendent consciousness at some degree of maturity, at some degree of existence in every human being. And that consciousness does care. The transcendent self that is nascent or active, or very active, within every single human being, that is the single most important part of our life. Meaning we care deeply whether the patterns of life on earth have an opportunity to blossom and evolve and to continue to become more sustainable, more intelligent, more complex, more beautiful, more powerful, more free, more successful than we are. That is the part in every parent that blesses the transcendent element, the synergistic element of their child, and says, you go forth and become greater than I am. Go forth and become greater than I am. This is part of life. We are part of life. And the transcendent element in life, to be consumed, to be willingly consumed by something greater than ourselves. It takes energy to raise a child. It takes time, it takes money, it takes natural resources, it takes stress, it takes worry. It's effort to raise an intelligent child. And it is a transcendent part within us that participates in that effort, that sacrifices, that sacrifies, that makes that which is more sacred, meaning I become less so that that which is within me can become more. I gamble less. I go out on less nights on the town so that I can give something to my child so that they can become more than I am. That transcendent aspect of life's program is why life just keeps getting bigger. You see, life began very tiny, and life's got a great design. Life's design is to start the size of a pea or less, without any name, without any species, without language, and to get bigger. And then divide and interrelate and get bigger. And divide and interrelate and get bigger. And life just keeps doing that. Until 24 billion years later, on one of billions of life-affirming planets, we find ourselves here, combining and creating something more complex. A child that builds on the science, on the knowledge of today, and then takes it a little bit further, and then takes it a little bit further, and then takes it a little bit further. such that we are evolving on exponential curves. So the human species is the biggest variable in what our planet will look like 1,000 years from now, number one. Number two, the human species is the biggest variable on whether 1 billion years from now, life from this planet will exist on thousands of other planets, creating synergy, creating new life. So that's the first part of the argument to the question, why cultural design? Number three, because of the narrow bandwidth of the conscious mind, back to that thing, we cannot invent a language every day, we cannot invent a habit every day, we cannot decide our diet every day. We do 90% of everything we do on a rhythm, on a routine. We don't decide to just exhale and then keep exhaling. We inhale and we exhale. We inhale and we exhale. So most of what we're doing is a rhythm. 90% of what we're doing is a routine. That's the cult. The unconscious circular energy of the most dominant species with the biggest potential on this planet is 90% routine, meaning it's unquestioned, done again and again and again. Cultural design is injecting consciousness into that equation, into that question. It's asking the question, is this the most intelligent thing to repeat tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow? You see, and if you change the cult 10%, it's having more impact than if you change the small part of the conscious mind that truly decides new things every day. 100%. So I wore this turtleneck because that's what I wore. I wore this necklace because that's what I wear. I'm using this microphone because that's my microphone. I've got this backdrop because I have. This is all cult. I'm using the English language because that's the language I use. I talk at this tonal range because I always have. 95% of what's going on in this moment, my haircut, my skin color, the way I'm talking, the gestures, they're all cult subroutines. There's stuff that I've done because at one point I learned them and started the routine. And now they're just looping. They're going round and round with little variations. It's a fractal loop. No hand gesture is exactly like the other one, but if anyone watched for an hour, they'd say, oh, that's Dane's hand gestures. That's Dane's voice. We can recognize the loop, the pattern. 95% of what's going on here is in a loop. The only thing that's different in this whole loop is one thing. And it's a thing that I've designed. The subject, meaning this is not a common subject. I've never heard it before. You've never heard it before. That's how you know it's not part of the cult. It's unfamiliar. It's unfamily. Family, cult. Familiar, cult. Unfamily, transcending the cult, evolving the cult, taking you out of the cult. The subject is out of the cult. Number one. The ideas are out of the cult. This silence out of the cult. Now, we are and enjoy limited variety, limited spontaneity. within the 5 or 10% of our day that we are capable of digesting, thinking, and managing. Oh, today I think I'll have apple pie instead of a croissant. But you didn't have a bibli. Why? You see, because both apple pie and croissant are part of the cult. You're just changing up your cult within the larger cult. A bibli hasn't been invented yet. It's made from fruits that haven't been genetically engineered yet, using cooking methods that haven't been designed yet. So no one's having a bibli today. But they will at some point in the probability field in time, because a number of things will be designed and it will become possible, and then it will compete. You know, croissants are part of the lexicon because they deserve to be. Meaning there are many, many, many dishes from around the world that could have become as well known as a croissant, but they would have had to have been as easy to cook and as tasty. Intelligent, in other words. Sustainable well-being per unit of energy invested. Croissants made the cut. Pizza made the cut. So the dishes, of all the tens of thousands of dishes that have existed in human history, that are the most popular on the planet, are, you know, the body likes them most of the time. Some of it is cult programming. You know, raw fish and tofu is not everyone's cup of tea, but if you're born in Japanese, it's without questionable. It's without question. It's delicious. It's fantastic. And for others with an acquired taste, it becomes delicious. It becomes fantastic. You try coffee for the first time. What's that bitter, horrible thing? Give me grape juice. You can learn. Cultural design is the art of changing the default mode network as an individual, as a couple, as a family, as a species, as a country. Now, all systems exist on a continuum of intelligence, meaning every system takes a certain amount of time, money, and natural resources and produces a certain amount of sustainable human well-being for a certain percentage of people. Every system can be improved. The system is the cult. We go to work here, we punch in here, we wear this uniform, we talk like this, we call our customers guests. We call our staff performers, if you work at Disney. This is our cult. This is our culture. And it produces these results. And those results at that cost exist at a certain point on the intelligence continuum. Every single cult meme, every single cult protocol can be 10 times more efficient than it is, can be 1,000% more intelligent than it is today. But the only way that you get a 10x return on investment is design. The only way you save 1,000% more natural resources while creating greater happiness for more people is design. It doesn't happen automatically. When you change the cult, when you design the cult successfully, you are changing the default mode network in your own brain and in your cults. And from that point forward, you have unconscious leverage, meaning the conscious mind cannot hold on to being aware of everything all the time. Your conscious mind cannot regulate breath, regulate blood, decide what your skin color is, lubricate your tongue, and do it all consciously. 95% of everything that you are doing and being and saying and all that is unconscious. You're not thinking, I'll invent the word. You're just saying the word because it's familiar. But when you edit the default mode network, when you edit your cult, and it becomes the new pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, after designing it to yield 1,000% more sustainable well-being, when you do that, you have influenced the largest influencing factor on the most influential species in history on this planet, with the potential of touching other planets in the next trillion years. That makes cultural design, intelligent cultural design, the single most important science, the single most important art form, the single most important undertaking for an evolutionary species on an evolutionary planet as part of life's protocol of continually transcending itself. And what we can be pretty sure of from observing life's journey from something the size of a pea to something so big we cannot even comprehend it today, in a mere 25 billion years. What we can be pretty sure of, knowing already that there are more than 1,000 life-affirming planets that we already know are out there, we can count on life over the next billion, 10 billion, trillion. Because life is not running out of time, we are. Life is not coming to an end. Our identity is coming to an end. We can be absolutely certain that on many of these life-affirming environment, that over the next billion, 10 billion, trillion years, that life will surpass everything that we are, that it will produce intelligent organisms so much more complex, so much more sustainable, so much more aware than we are, that we cannot even imagine them. The only question we have to ask is, do we want to play a role? Do we want to be a part of bringing the most beautiful elements of this planet out into the galaxy? And are the identities, the patterns of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, including extraplanetary research and expedition, are they worthy of competition in the universal dance that is life's journey? Produce a variety of patterns, see how they interact, and let the most intelligent, the most excited to live pattern continue, cannibalizing itself, life cannibalizing life in a continual evolutionary journey, as through each expression, through each species, life reaches out into the future and explores more and more complex, more and more graceful, more and more dimensional, more and more beautiful more and more powerful and successful expressions of its potential. Do we want to be a part of that? Or do we want to be cannibalized by the next version of that? Because in the history of life, life has never gotten simpler. Life has never gotten smaller. Life has never gotten narrower. Life has never gotten more dogmatic. Rather, the simpler, narrower, unchanging facets of life have been vigorously consumed by dynamic, evolutionary, emerging patterns in life. As life consumes its own tail, as life reaches for the ideal, for that which is more, and that which is more. It is our nature to become more because we are part of life. It is our nature to explore, to reproduce, because that's what life does. That's what life has always done. That's how life went from the size of a pea to everything we know today. In cultural design, the conscious interjection in the evolutionary process is our opportunity to accelerate, to exponentially accelerate what life has been doing all along, what life will do anyway. This makes cultural design the most important subject, skill, science, activity in an evolving human being. Now, to evolve your identity, to evolve your cult, to evolve your relationship, your family, it's very simple. You take a pattern. Take the dating pattern. We scan things, we put up our walls, we go on a coffee date, we meet in a crowded room, we feel each other out, and we try to look good. And then most of the time, it's a disappointment for one or both people. It's not a peak experience. Well, how do you design a dating protocol where 90% of the time it is a phenomenal experience, even if you don't ever see the person again? How do you design that? Well, you look at the recipes. It's you do this, you email back and forth, you say these things, you don't say these things. And you get together here and you do this and you don't do that. We don't talk about real things. We do this and we don't do this. And then we produce this boring result. But if you change this and change this and change this and change this, change this, can you change the statistics? For example, what if you design a date as a peak experience? First dates as a peak experience. What if that's the goal? Let's have a conversation for an hour or so and see, can we design a peak experience together? Then if we like the peak experience we designed and we realize that we work well together in creating a peak experience, let's create another peak experience. And if we really like creating peak experiences together once a week, then why not just make it a part of the new cult, the new routine? One peak experience a week with so-and-so. And if we don't, then go and create a peak experience with somebody else. That's cultural design. If we don't like the way that this person and this person and this person ended the last relationship, so-and-so sent me a text, so-and-so did this, so-and-so did, we don't like it. It's just so unpleasant and awkward. I didn't know what to do. Well, then, can we design together a great way to end relationships? Can we partner to have incredible endings in our relationships. And what would an incredible relationship ending look like to you? And here's what it would look like to me. And is there overlap? And this is the thing we normally always wear. But, it would be so much more fun and nice to do and wear this instead. Could we create a cult, even if it's just at home, where you wear this and I wear this, and we feel more well-being with less energy? And normally we've been eating this and we've been eating this, but could we design a diet that consumes less energy but delivers more sustainable well-being? And what would that look like for you and for me? That's cultural design. Normally what we do is we send people to school and then they do this and this and this, and then they get their GED and then they do this and this and this, so that then one day they can retire and enjoy themselves. Well, what if we turn that on its head and say, well, we want to start off enjoying ourselves, and in order to enjoy ourselves, we're going to learn this. And in order to enjoy ourselves more, we're going to provide this and this service in this way. And then we don't retire, we just enjoy ourselves even more, helping other people enjoy themselves in this way. And what's the result? Does it take less or more energy? Does it produce more sustainable well-being? And what if, rather than voting for representatives, we voted on specific issues using an app? We didn't go to the polls. We voted issue by issue, nuance by nuance, on each section of every bill. And the people that didn't read the bill couldn't vote. What would be the result if we did that? Well, you have to find out, right? You have to give it a shot. That's cultural design. What if, rather than living with cities and strangers and nobody knowing each other, what if we got together in pods of 100 people and everyone really got to know each other? What if we did that? What's the impact on our sustainable well-being? What if our pods of 100 people didn't go off to work? We worked in community. What is the impact on that? And what if, rather than dogmatically speculating, we measured? We did experiments and measured the results and published them, whether they agree with our dogmas or not. What if we evolve our dogmas to catch up with our data, rather than try and contort the data to fit into our dogmas? What if our dogmas evolved into living awarenesses, rather than pat suppositions so that we can conserve energy and not think? That's cultural design. What if everyone had a user's manual? And before interacting with people, you looked at the user's manual. And then you saw, can I use this person well, and can they use me well? Can I avoid breaking them and avoid being broken? What if we studied the user's manual and gave our user's manual and then interacted knowing how to use one another to create sustainable well-being? What if we did that? What if we paid people to learn things that were useful, such as massage and cooking and building low-cost housing, rather than taxing people to teach people unuseful things that nobody would pay them for because they're not actually useful? I'm not going to pay you to learn algebra. I don't need you to know algebra, but I'll pay you to learn massage if you learn it on my back. And I'll start off paying you $5 an hour, and by the time you're really good, I'll pay you $100 an hour. I will pay you to learn massage because that's actually useful. What if we evolved education? Do you only learn things that are useful to your community and your species over the next 100 years? And if nobody would pay you to learn it, then you know it's useless. And you go learn something useful, like cooking delicious meals. This is cultural design. So I am a cultural designer at the individual level, at the relationship level, at the community level, at the national level. Design is the interjection of consciousness into the status quo. with the intention of creating more sustainable well-being per unit of energy invested than the status quo. And a good design produces 1,000% more sustainable well-being per unit of energy invested than the status quo. That's a 10x design. That's a highly intelligent design. That's what I do. Now, I encourage you to learn this art. It is a profound art, a satisfying art, an art you can apply anywhere, anytime, with anyone. You can design a better template, a better pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. And if you'd like my help, just reach out.